Easy troop, in today's video we are going to look at building out a jungle track using just Logic Pro, and it's going to sound like this. If you want to skip to a key moment in this video, perhaps the breaks or the bass breakdown, all the timings are up here right now for you to jump to. Now for this video, I'm going to walk you through the production elements for each section. We're going to look at chopping the arm in break, how we work at layers in the break, how we built up and created the pad patches. And if you want to, from the link in the description, you'll be able to download the project template and open it up and manipulate this template into your own track to release yourself. As is tradition, for the first month I'll put a massive discount, so subscribers get a massive benefit there, which is your incentive to hit that subscribe button. First things first, let's have a look at the finished project and go over how the template works and what's inside it, so that when you're following along with this, you know what you're looking at and where to find everything. Well, the first thing is you only see a few channels here, but it goes all the way up to number 64. That is because mostly the arm end break, if we drop it down, has loads of its own channels. There's processing independent on a whole bunch of the channels in terms of EQ, bus sends and other things, but it's all in a group. So press the little arrow here and that will zip up for you. Select it, we can see all the different patterns again for it as well, which is how we get little breakout parts like this. And then everything below it in the different colors up to the heavy kit are all percussion wise. So, you know, we've got the ride outs, for example, and all the different patterns with rattle and shake loop, thin conga loop, and then the heavy kick pattern, which is made in a synth. And I'll cover how I go about layering and building up these breaks in a later part of the video, and I'll show you some of the techniques. But then we've just got this synth kick giving another pattern, so then they all come together like. Okay, so above that we've got these two different pads, and we made both the pads and we'll cover making those as well as we go throughout the video. You see it starts at pattern 8. Now if you press H, it'll open up some other channels for you, and these are the channels used to make those pad sounds, which you'll see in the tutorial and how they're used. So you've got the chords, you've got the individual patches, and you've got the sample there, but they're just all hidden away for the moment. So you've got your two different pads there, which are these. Then we've got our two basses here. It's actually the same bass, but one is mono and one is stereo, and there's a real purpose for that. And again, as we go through the video, we'll break that down, but the two bass layers, so we've got the mono, and then the stereo does this to it. And then we've got a series of vocal samples and chops that we've used within the track. They're just stock from Logic. We've done a little bit of tuning with them. And then we've made our own reverse pad here using part of one of those vocals. And much like the pads, if you want the details of how that was created, press H again, and you will have a hidden channel here, Audio 6, and it's got the effects and everything on we used to create that pad. So now that we've done that, let's get into the tutorial sections. And first up, we're going to look at taking our arm end break and chopping it up so it works in this style of music. There are two links for a free sample pack and a place where if you sign up you can download any 10 samples and you might find some breaks in there. Once we've got a drum break, that is the key thing to work with. So let's get straight into that. All right, so I'm going to use Logic because it is my weapon of choice, but whatever DAW you want to use, it doesn't really matter. The key thing is that you know a couple of the tools inside it. I want the arm end break. As you see, I put in arm end and it brings up about 4 million things, but I think our bad boy's right there. I'm going to drag this over. In Logic, I can do a little sneaky thing where it lands straight in the sampler for me, rather than me having to open a sampler and bring it in. And so now I've got this arm end break chopped up into all these different segments. So So we've got our break, we've got it chopped up in some kind of fashion, whether you've done individual samples or whether you've done it in a sampler like me. Key thing now is to have this rolling out at the right tempo. Now, for jungle, you're looking at 170 range. We can go a little bit lower and do that kind of breakbeat sound at 160. So from there, it's very simply a case of rearranging these chopped up samples. And we can see it stretches out just over the 4-bar region. If we play it back, it hasn't really worked out, has it? So what we can do is highlight the whole lot, and if we quantize it to 16ths, it's going to land pretty much where we want it to be. So we've got our quantize over here, and we've got it set to 16ths already. If we hit Q, you can see it's pulled everything back. If we go right up to the top now, it looks as if it's actually in there. And now if we play it back, getting closer, but it's still a little off in places. A key thing about this, it's been sped up quite drastically, which means the sample itself is being played a lot quicker than it previously was, and that's why we're getting that choppiness and it's cutting away a lot. Really simple thing we can do, right, is just take the overall pitch and just pitch it down. If we really want to go in on the choppiness, and this is where the kind of ninja thing comes back in, because in a sampler back in the day, we could only have a few seconds, and the stretching and adjustment, that's what caused all that kind of pitching and wavering. We can do this in a much better, easier way that enables us to manipulate and work with everything a little bit more. And when you've made your rolling jungle tune, you can put it out using the channel sponsor, which is DistroKid. They're my distributor. I use them to get all my music onto the major streaming platforms, and you could do that too for a price an independent artist can easily afford. But it gets even better. In the description, there is a discount off of your first year of unlimited distribution to get your music out to all those major streaming platforms. In Logic here in the quick sample, I can switch this little guy on, which is a flex time, and I can have something called follow tempo on. Now, just by doing that, we're in a better region straight away. Now I can pitch it down. Play around with the glide between samples. Have all kinds of fun with it. Now, of course, at the moment, we're just looping it over and over and over, whereas a lot of the jungle vibe really mixed it up and played with the rhythms. And now we've got all these individual slices, we can do that basically as much as we want. Now, one way to do that is to do it in the piano roll and move all these notes around and re-trigger them however you like. So we could take this chunk here, and then we could go and take this bit here. And that definitely gets us closer to that kind of vibe, right? The way I like to do it is to chop up the region though. That will keep a note in each region. I can now just shuffle these up as much as I like, and we're good to go. I find it really useful to reinforce it with some of your own sounds, like so. I've shown you the method and the idea and way we can do it. Let's have a look at it in this project, in context, and the extra bits I've done just to take it a little bit further. All right, so let's have this bit at the start. I've done two versions. I've got like a really ambient washed out version and then the main drop. They're both these MIDI bits here. The only things that are really happening is using the compressor just to glue it into a more modern sound. Just a couple of dB. Helping it all stick together there. There's a gate, and the gate's doing some pretty hard work. see it's closing really, really quick at times. Just chopping the break right out. There's a lot of EQ going on, just balancing it out so it fits in the mix. There's a lot more raw and original sound, and then with this on, a lot of control going in there, so it fits in context of. And what I'm going to do is start with audio, and I'm going to find a couple of samples in the loops library. So first things first, let's jump over into the loop library. We can get to that over here on the right hand side, just with a simple click on our lovely little loop, and or the shortcut is O. Now, if your library is limited or shows less than what's in mine, or we use a drum sample that you can't find, what you need to do is go up to the top here into Logic Pro, go down to Sound Library, and here you can open the Sound Library Manager, and you can download the packs you want, or you can download all essential sounds or download all available sounds. As you can see, I don't even have that downloaded, and if I were to open the Sound Library Manager, there'd be a whole bunch of things in here that I don't have. But for the most part, I've got all the loops that I'm after. And if you're missing something, that's where to find the extras. And don't sleep on these extra sounds just because they're stock sounds that come with Logic. They're updated pretty frequently, and there's some amazing stuff in there for you to use to save you buying sample packs right off the bat. Although if you want to, my sample pack's linked below. So we can go instrument just here, or drums, and we could filter it out via genre, or we can hit tempo here and scroll ourselves down to something that's sort of an amenable tempo, or we can look at something that's going to be, I don't know, like in the 85 kind of range. 87 would be great, but it's what it is. See here, there's a whole bunch of breaks that I don't have. And that's got a really nice shaker sound in it. So I'm going to grab that. We're going to have that one. We're going to drop it straight into the quick sampler by just dragging it over and dropping it. Let's see what else we got. I mean, I kind of like that kick snare. Who knows if I'll use it, but let's drag it over. Yeah, it's got too many snares. That kind of works. Let's take that. I mean, that just feels too easy, right? Alright, that'll do. We'll work with those. So first things first, let's take this one here and we'll just make ourselves a little loop. We'll set our BPM up to 174. If you're unfamiliar with some of the structures I'm about to use and some of the rhythms, it's all covered in this video that I'll link up here somewhere. So I'm going to use a little pencil tool, make ourselves this right here, and yeah, I think a little 4-bar loop will be nice here. So we drop this in Quick Sampler. It would have already chopped it up for us quite nicely. Now we've upped the tempo massively, so let's switch on the flex time and leave follow tempo on. That will speed things up a little bit for us without us having to do too much. And let's just have a little listen through and hear what we've got. So first things first, I don't really want that. In fact, I only really wanted the shaker from this. So over here on filter, I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to put it on a high pass with the 24 dB slope and only give it the top end. Now let's hear what we've got here. We could literally use that pattern, bring it up again like that, and then loop that round like this. Yeah, there's a couple of bits in there I don't like. That one there I'm not a fan of, so we'll select that, move this elsewhere. Alright, that'll do. It's just an idea there for a little top shaker. Just going to copy this and make it the 4 bars by holding Option and drag. And then I'm going to click and select the two, press T and G, click them, and it will join them together as one for me. So that's now a little 4-bar loop. Let's have a look at our next one. Speaking of which, I think I'm probably going to use the kick and the snare out of this. So we can just make a short clip like that. And let's see, what do we got? We'll do the classic DnB pattern. Velocity wise, we want this to be kind of not too all over the place, like loud and proud, but we can have a little bit of a velocity change, why not? Now we'll just go to the end one here and maybe mix this up. I don't know, stick an extra kick in, even slightly lower. Like that, and we could maybe like roll the snare off, a really low snare roll. Like that. That gives a nice little end to the 4-bar and just a little ear signal that, you know, we're rolling back over here. I like that. Depends what you want to do. Super simple technique to try out though, right? I'll do the same things before. I'm going to select all of them, T and G, glue them together. I'm now not feeling the shaker pattern, even though we rolled with that. I think what I'll do with the shaker pattern, loop it like this instead. That way we can just manipulate this first one here. I think we'll just use it as a gap filler. So that pattern alteration there gives us that little shuffle, but that happens every bar, whereas the kick and snare shuffle happens at the end of the fourth bar. That just gives that constant rolling feel that I kind of like. It's all about the groove with these kind of drums. Now I think what we can do here on this old school flex beat, we're going to grab Q sampler. We're literally just using the kick snare here and there's a hat in the middle. We're going to bring this all the way down like that. We are going to right click, we're going to create a drum machine designer. And it's literally just going to do those 4 samples there for us, look. And we can bring our pattern down onto that. We can get rid of the original. And the reason for that is I can now select the kick, for example, here, and I can pitch it as I want. And I want to bring it up like that. The other thing I want to do here is I can now unfold this like this, or within the mixer, if I press X, I can unfold it like so. And I'm just going to send the snare to a bit of reverb. We can just really quickly name these, look. And just fold those away again. I think we can shape that kick drum sound just a little bit as well. So again, we'll grab the kick just here. We can use our filter here, leave it on 100%, put it on something like creamy, give it a bit of drive. Just a bit of flavour to it. But now they're completely separate, we can mix them up as much as we want anyways. Alright, and then we had this break here, which what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to right click, copy MIDI pattern, draw ourselves a pattern in here. What I want to do is just Command V that pattern in and just see what that's like. Way too aggressive, right? But let's try using the ADSR. So I just want it to be on those main transients there. Let's copy the MIDI again. Drop that in again. It's all kind of all over the place at the minute. You can see that with the MIDI pattern right here. We can have some fun here and just use a quick quantize. If we put it on something like 1/8 notes, we get that really crazy choppy break. If we do like the 1/16 swing B, right, let's tidy it up a bit. So we've got a kick there, which is nice. We don't really want that second kick, so get rid of you. Don't want that third kick. So what I think we can do with that is take that and just really down its velocity. So now we have, don't need another snare hit after that. Got that kind of nice ride sound in there. I think maybe have that right at the start of the loop. Another kick here is almost right where we want it. There's our snare, we're going to bring you back. All right, so now we've just got this really chopped up. Let's lay that in with the other bits we've done, see what we get. The other thing I'm going to do here is extend this out, and I'm not going to have this drop each time. So we're going to copy the whole thing, and we can maybe have that repeat every 2 bars. You'll see a theme here, hopefully. You know, we've got that little shuffle in the tops every bar, this doing a little hi-hat thing, ride thing, whatever, every 2 bars, every 4 bars, the kick snare rolls, and everything kind of all gels together in this kind of flowy, syncopated vibe. All right, let's take it away. Pretty boring, right? Now I would be inclined to keep using this natural jazzy break and take all those little hi-hat bits and make loads of like really fast rhythms in there. But we've got a bunch of other tools to look at. So I'm going to use a drum synth and put like an electric hi-hat and in there. So let's go into here, let's go software instrument. And if we go drum synth, let's go mono, boop. Now we've got one of those. Now we've changed kick to hats and cymbals. We don't want a crash cymbal here. I want sharp hi-hat. Let's make ourselves a nice fast hi-hat rhythm, like solidly on the 16th. Let's give it a nice little velocity control as it goes along. All right, I think we'll do that every 2 bars rather than every bar there. I can kind of work with that other break. I'm going to select all those. I'm going to use that MIDI humanize function again, just to shape these up a little bit. So we can just randomize by about 5, operate only, and just to give them a bit of variation across that. And we can just Duplicate that again, like so. It's clearly too loud, I get it, we're gonna shape it now. So we can do a whole bunch of crazy good stuff with this. We can pitch it to wherever we want. That's actually kind of cool, pitch right down. That actually kind of works really nicely. I want it to be kind of a digital sound, but sort of dirty sitting in there. Attack generally works really well at 0. If you do too much of a slow attack, you get that weird effect. But you can have a little bit in there. Right, honestly, 0. Dissonance. Proper crashy. And then make it really short as well. There we go. Now if we wanted to tune it, we could put key tracking on, but I'm going to take this another step further, and I'm going to use the drummer now. We can go over here into drummer. If you've seen any of my track from scratches, you will have seen me do this before. If we go songwriter, in the drummer down the bottom here, turn off the kick, turn off the snare, turn off the hi-hat, turn on the rides, take the fills all the way down. You've just instantly got these beautiful top rides. We can change the pattern just using this most of the time, or how high we want it in velocity, or if we drag the cymbals across and get a faster pattern. It just does such a great job every single time. If we go into the mixer for it, go into the compressor, leave distortion up on hard, put this to like 3/1, bring the threshold right down, set the auto gain to -12. And just gain it to where you need it. Also the EQ, because of the way we're using this, we don't need any of the low end, so we can just drag that away. If you put a nice boost in like this, you can just hear where it's nice to roll it off. You don't need any of that. If you can't hear it without, with. Right, a ninja little hack now. Let's say you're working in, I don't know, we'll pretend we're working in F. Watch this with the kick and snare trick. So we're going to add 2 more drum synths. So this is going to be our kick pattern, which we know is that. The kick and snare respond to pitch. So if I was to bring this down an octave, all right. Yeah, we can literally just go to the end here, loop that out. And now let's just design our kick so it works with this kind of break. Right, we can leave pitch where it is because we've just tuned it. It's decay really. So now it just really beefs out the bottom end. You can distort the hell out of it if you want. Just find a little touch like that. It's just a layer, and that layer is now in tune with the rest of your track. Again, presuming you're in F. We can now do the same thing with the snare. And again, it's decay. It's the big one, just little in tune and dirt. Can be quite a nice little touch as well. Without. That's all it's adding in. What can be a super nice touch as well is we sent everything to that reverb before, right? So if we go into here, go into bus, we can give that the same reverb and room space. Really, really nice. Right, now one last thing. We've built this up so that at the end of each 4 bars it has that little roll off, kind of like signifying its ending. We're going to use a drummer one more time to really like sell that drum roll at the end. So let's add one more drummer track. And go T and I, we're just going to chop that off there at the 4 bar. We don't want the rest of it. All we really want is the last little bit at the end here. Maybe a bar and a half like that. We're going to go to fill, crank that right up, turn off the kick, the hi-hat, just leave the toms on. It only shows the one note, but there's a whole lot going in there. Go to the compressor like we did before, crank it up with the -12. I'm going to give it a 3:1 ratio again. Pull the threshold back a bit so it catches those toms. There we go. We can even apply a little bit of the swing that we've been using because it's on 16th. That'll work nicely. You can move this around. It would sometimes change the rhythm depending on what you've got. The velocity changes depending on what you do there. Tend to just stick it at loud for this kind of thing. The more you give it, space-wise, the more kind of flex it has within the roll. And where you place it depends heavily as well as to what it gets to do. So that's the arm end break and all of our custom layers and loops taken care of. Now let's have a look at creating a custom pad for this jungle style. So let's have a look at how we go about making this classic pad sound. As you can hear, there's a lot going on, and when each note triggers here, we're just sweeping up into the next sound. Now, the reason that works is because this is a sample. So how do we go about making that sample so we can do this effect? Here we go. So what I've done here is I've created 3 different layers. I'm going to go over how those layers all work together and how you'd go about making them. Now for today's video, we're just using sine waves, saw waves, some basic filters, and a little bit of unison. Let's have a listen to this as our first texture. And this is the body of the pad. Now the reason it works the way it does is because of unison, a little bit of detuning with another wave type, and that is pretty much it, believe it or not. What I'll do here is I'll go File and Initialize. And now what we're going to have is a saw wave that's being played over a chord. I think it's important at this point we have a look at how this chord works and the reason that I've chosen the notes that I have. Now I've kept everything in C here, so we're just using the white notes. And the chord I'm using here is a G major 7/9. You don't need to worry about the music theory side of it. Basically, white notes, skip every other note is going to be the easiest way to get around to this. And the reason it's a G is because we're leading here off of the G note. Now something you can do with this is lead it off of the C note, and it will always be a little bit easier to transpose down when you come to sample it because you're always going to operate from C. But if you're making your own chord in this kind of fashion, we know it's leading off of a G and it's a G chord, and we can tune it accordingly if we like. Here we go. To make this chord, it's very, very simple. So we're going to lead off our G here. We just skip every other white note here. And then we have our G 7/9. Obviously it sounds horrendous and busy when it's just a saw wave being played over and over, but when we start to introduce our unison and our spread, that's where we get that kind of pad vibe coming from. So in Alchemy we can go into oscillator A here, and that's where we find our unison for oscillators. We've got number here and we can push that up, and we've got detune just here, and that's how detuned each voice is from the other one. And we're going to want to bring that back down a bit and then push it up again so we can find a nice tuning. So here we go, there's a bit of spread. And 4 voices gives us a nice wide spread there. But obviously 50% detune is just too much, so we want to dial that back. Somewhere around there, that's kind of nice, right? Now it's a little bit harsh and big, especially for this kind of pad sound we're going for. I like to control it within the oscillator, but you can go to global and use the filter there if that's what you've got available in your synth. Alchemy allows me to have a filter on each oscillator, which is a lovely touch. I can switch this on just here and just dial it back. Pulling that back to where we find it to be quite a nice area. Now something else I did in my initial patch was I used this noise oscillator here. I added a bit of vinyl noise in. At the minute it's far too much and muddies everything up, doesn't it? If we use the low cut here and we take out everything that we don't need, it doesn't muddy it up so much anymore. It just gives us a bit of crackle in the top end, and when we open up the cutoff it comes through a lot more. Perhaps too much, so maybe we'd bring it back to -9. What I found quite nice here was to have the cutoff open up quite harshly, and we can assign it to an AHDSR, an envelope essentially. When it's highlighted like this in Alchemy and it's blue, I can switch this on and link it to an envelope like so. This here would link it to ADSR1, which this already controls volume, so we want to make sure we create a new one. We're going to turn on sync and we're going to give it a bit of an attack to bring it backwards, and we use our depth control here, and if you have a look at the cutoff you'll see that it pulls back here. If you two are using Alchemy and you really want to learn more about all the amazing features that are in it, I have a complete masterclass on Alchemy and I'll link that below for you. So now this envelope here will pull down the cutoff when we play our chord back. And depending on how we have our curvature, we'll either get the attack or we won't, or it'll be quite harsh. I quite like that for this use. Now to give this a bit of texture and body, I used the second oscillator, and we could just go with the saw wave again and lower it down by 12 semitones, which will bring it down 1 extra octave. Instead though, I utilised the complex waves that were in here. I think we went with big and dirty, which is kind of like a distorted sine wave. Applied a similar filter, just taking away that top end fuzz. That just helps thicken everything up. You could get a similar effect by using a sine wave and using the drive on your filter. I'm going to dial it back a bit in volume too. Now the other thing I made use of was in the effects, we switched this on and we just put a reverb over the entire thing. I used the convolution reverb and probably just the grand hall, but with a nice gentle mix amount. Bring the pre-delay right down. That gives us a pretty nice sound there, right? So let's have a look at the next layer sound and how that works with that initial body of the pad. Incredibly simple. We're using exactly the same chord. And all this is a sine wave set to arpeggiate. There's an arpeggiator built directly into Alchemy. If you're using another synth in, say, Logic, you could go over to MIDI effects and apply the arpeggiator from here, or use the arpeggiator in whichever door you are, or use the arpeggiator in your door. Every single door has an arpeggiator. If not, it's time to get a new door. And all this does is cycle through that scale at a really slow BPM It's 1/4 on our BPM here of 170. And effects, it's just reverb again. I don't think we need much more explaining here. It's very, very simple. That's all it is, that arpeggiated sine wave. The two sit together like this. And then we've got the ethereal choir. Here I've just used a choir patch and made essentially no changes. But what we have changed are our chords. We've split this down to just 2 notes. We're using the root G note, but an octave lower. And we're using a D note, which is part of the chord, up in the same octave. And that just adds in another texture. So all 3 layered together. That's it. So we've got that nice arpeggiator moving up and down. We've got the big built-out pad, and we've got that bit of a vocal texture in there, just for a bit of character, really, and bringing everything down an octave. We just like that kind of vocal texture in there. So what we do from here is we bounce this out as a single sample. We can just take these 3 channels here, solo them, hit Command and B, and bounce this out as a single sample. I like to leave the tail in, because if we do decide to ever just let it fade away as a sample, well, we have all that detail in there for us. So the reason we bounce it down to a sample is so we can emulate that old school jungle and drum and bass sound, where we'd likely have taken multiple synths and samples and crushed them all into one layer anyway. And it allows everything to pitch and ebb and flow all together. Let me show you what that means and how that works. When I bring it into Quick Sampler, now we start to be able to get that effect that we really have from the classic like Jungle DnB pads. I've purposely kept this melody really, really simple. Again, it's just all within the white note, but it just moves up or down 1 note each time. And if we zoom in, you can see that each note overlaps the other one ever so slightly. And that's really important, because that means this trigger happens while this note is still happening and being played. What that lets the sampler know is to move this sample down to this note instead of re-triggering it. Let me show you what I mean by that and how it sounds. At the moment, when we play this back, it's going to trigger the sample each time. Kind of works, but it's not exactly what we're after, is it? And the reason for that are 2 key things in here. If we look at amp and we have polyphony, we want to take our polyphony down to mono. Mono means it can only ever play the sample once at 1 key. So now when we play it back, they'll never overlap, but it does re-trigger. The second is glide here over in pitch, and this is the amount of time it will take for 1 note to go to the other. Instead of happening immediately at 0 milliseconds, we can give it a bit of glide and we get this effect. Now the reason everything sounds really different and kind of retextured each time is because we've got 1 sample that's being pitched down to different places. Remember I said before about you could make your chord so it always launches from C? Well, that would be your root key. Now we made one that launches from G, and the reason everything sounds a little bit off is our root key here is set to C3. Well, we want to set that to something slightly different, don't we? Perhaps G3. That's given us a really moody pad, hasn't it? Give it a longer glide time. So G2 is going to be our range. The other thing you may find is that the pitching up and down is an issue, and we've got our A and D here, so our attack and decay, and we can control how that performs too. We can also decide where the sample starts. Maybe we want it to start a little further up. We can use the slider just here and bring it to a different point. Let's give it an extra bit of texture by using a filter distortion, like we discussed in Alchemy, but now we're applying it to the sample and the collective whole thing. Let's change our filter to be a low pass creamy, which gives a nice distortion. Another nice touch we could do here is, again, take some of that high end away with our filter. Let's utilize an LFO and give it a little bit of movement. So we've brought our cutoff back. We've got an LFO 1 here. We're going to press this button to sync it. 1/4 for the time being. And we need to set a target. And our target here is going to be filter cutoff. And then the slider is how much that's affected. And you can see Logic draws that in. I want this to be really subtle. And I definitely want to slow it down too, so maybe 1/2. If we bring our resonance up, we can get some effects out of this as well. Very simple automation to fade that in. Something around there is kind of nice. Something that might only be available in Logic is you can switch this guy on here. It allows follow tempo, meaning it's going to try and sync this sample up to our track, but it gives us access to this speed option as well. And we can do things like halve the playback of the sample, but not change its octave. This gives us access to a whole new set of characters. We can speed it up as well. To a ridiculous degree if we like. Now we just add an amen and off we go. There's our pads all taken care of. Next, we're going to dive into making a bass. Now this time I used ES2 in Logic, and the patch we make is really, really simple, but it's super versatile. And I wanted to utilize that and show you that in the template. So we actually did 3 different styles of bass, all using the one sample patch and the effects chain, and it works really, really well. Once you've created it and saved it yourself or taken it from the template, you can utilize it in those ways as well, and by just minor changes of the effects, use it in multiple different tracks. Alright, so let's have a little look at this bass patch we've done here. Alright, very simple little hits, and we've got more of a ripper type section. We've got more of a rhythmic section of the same thing. And then we've got the long, drawn out kind of evolving reefs. All made from the same sound. Now what we're hearing now is kind of the mono middle bit of it. There's a layer to it, and that gives it its kind of width and stereo field, and that makes it sound like this. Right, it's a super simple patch. A lot of what's going on comes from the effects. So we'll go back just to having the middle kind of vibe of it, and we'll keep the long Reese sound. I'm going to turn off the gain, the exciter, the compressor, the multiband, the EQ, and I'm going to leave the sidechain compressor on because it doesn't do anything when the drums aren't playing. There's the original. And you could absolutely utilize this. And remember, if you download this project, this patch will be in here for you. But honestly, you could make this in a few seconds. Super simple, right? What we've got is just one oscillator on the triangle here. Brought it down an octave so we can still work in a higher octave, but you could leave it at 0 and bring your MIDI down. Same scenario at the end of the day. We've then got the cut brought back just a touch on the filter. Well, nearly halfway here, 0.626. I don't know what it is in frequency. It doesn't tell us. ES2 is about 1 billion years old. We've then pumped up the drive just a touch here, 0.19. We've then got the overall distortion over here that's given us a big part of the effect set to soft. If we switch it to hard, for example, you can hear what a difference it makes. All right, that gives us a big part of the sound as well. And that's basically it. The other reason that it works and it's so free running and that phasing's happening is because of some global settings. So across the top, we switch over to legato. So that means when our notes cross over one another, they swing into one another. And then we've got unison turned on. Without unison, it's got a big weighty. With the 8 voices in unison though, it's what makes our sound, right? And then the way the unison voices relate together, we've got oscillator start set to 3, so they can all start at slightly different points. If we switch that to say soft, we start to get a different sound. It's a lot tighter. And we get a lot of that pulsing with the wave. Then analogs pumped all the way up to full with CBD set to 100%. And we've got our glide time just pushed up here a little bit to 130 milliseconds. And that helps the sound move around. So that's our foundation patch. Again, download the project. It's in there for you as Jungle Bass. And then everything else is really a shaping thing. So first off, I said that this is the mono part, and then we've got the stereo part. So if I switch gain on, we're now monoed. Goes a lot quieter, but we get everything that should sit in the middle always, no matter what's going on with the track. We've then got an exciter, and the exciter's hooked up to this modulator here. And what it's doing is distorting around this to a pattern generating different harmonics, all linked to the LFO and envelope. So when we switch it on, that's how we get some nice movement distortion, and it's all kept right in the center. Then got a compressor, just gluing everything together by quite a way. Not sidechained to anything, it's just catching those peaks, like when we add extra harmonics, it's just squeezing it all down. Then got the multi-pressor, that's giving us a big lift up here in the upper mids and some control on the low end and the high end as well. And then we've got the EQ, and that's doing a lot of the shaping work. Giving us some more uppers, giving us some more upper mids, taking away excessive high end that we didn't need, and just controlling the extreme lows. And that's it. The only real difference going on in the stereo part of it, which gives us this effect, is that we're really limited in the EQ band. We've just got all this high end up here. When we take the mids away, it's just these really thin sides, just to help it all spread out. And by having them separate, we can control their balance, etc. And we can make sure that we're always going to have the two not cancel each other out entirely, and we'll always have at least the mids working even on any old system, and that gives us that. Next, we're going to look at adding a couple of vocal samples. It would have been great if there was like some reggae vocals or something in Logic, but we've got a limited framework to work with. You can obviously record your own vocals into the template or use other sample packs. But let me just show you a couple of techniques that we can use just to add a little bit of spice and flair into the tune. Alright, so we've used a couple of little vocal effects. That'd be great if there was like some reggae vocals or something in Logic that I could use, but I don't think there are, at least I couldn't find any. Now they are in a different key to the track that I was working in here. So when we hover over them and we switch into flex mode up here, if we press E to open up our editor, what we can see is I've moved them note-wise within key. We're in all the white notes, but we're launching off of G, the mode of G. And that's literally all I've done. Put them in here, put them in flex mode. Instead of using the pitch corrector to shift them in real time, we've nailed them down into that right range. So now we've got this. That's all we're doing for the time being. I've used the little delayed one here, made it slightly longer and stretched it out and reversed it to give a bit of a build up just here. And we use it again later in this little breakdown section. So I've got another empty track just down here, and we're just going to hold Option, drag down, and pop it on there. And what I need is a reverb. We can use Space Designer. We'll get some nice cool sound effects out of that. So let's go down into Reverb, grab Space Designer, and I want a big, long, open space. So if we go into the presets, let's go large spaces, and let's have a nice long hall. Ancient church seems like it would be a relatively good sound. Right, let's just loop ourselves a little section here, solo it out. That's quite nice. So I'm going to take the dry away, pump up the wet a little bit. We don't want to go all the way up in Space Designer. It has a tendency to clip. We can probably get away with bringing that right up to like -2. And I want to put a delay after that as well. So we're just going to go into here, we're going to go delay, we're going to use the tape delay, and we're going to put that onto 1/4, but with a little bit of deviation here, so it's not super duper precise. Use the low cut, I don't want anything below sort of like 600 hertz, so I've got room for all the drums and everything to come in when this drops or when it fades in, or whatever we decide to go with. We want 100% dry, and we want a good bit of the wet signal. Test it again. Cool, and we want to pump the feedback up. I want that to be quite a bit longer. That's sort of what we're after. Going to dial the feedback back a bit, and that will be in the ballpark that we want. So what I can do here, I can right click and we can do bounce in place, or again, we can do Control and B to get that. And we're going to call you Rev Box Delay, like that. I want to go to a new track. I want to leave the source alone in case I want to make anything else with it. That'll give me a new bit of audio like that. We're just going to mute you away. And if you download the project, you press H, you'll get the hidden channels here, and it will show up in there for you if you want to see it again and make anything else with it. I press H again, and it's going to disappear for now. And now we've got this piece of audio that I'm going to reverse like so. And now we're going to use that as a bit of a build-in up here. Do something like that with it. Cool, we've just got ourselves a nice little transitional sound there that we've made. That's clearly way too loud. I'm just going to use gain, take it back by about 6 dB. And there's a nice little use of a reverse vocal effect on a reverb with a delay, just to build ourselves some nice little pads and transitions. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next one, and for more tutorials you can hit right here.